So I can't help to laugh that we're still continuing this fake argument fight against disinformation. And the people that are perpetrating this fight against disinformation are actually the ones that are spreading disinformation themselves. Which the irony just already speaks for itself. That's why it's so hysterical. That's why it's just absolute garbage. And the only reason that they're doing it is to manufacture their narratives to make sure it manipulates the masses and doesn't get, and there's no dissent, no counter arguments to their unbelievable claims. Their unbelievable claims of, wrongs within COVID, wrongs with war propaganda, the wrongs with everything. The reason that they're doing this is so that the establishment, along with the media, the corporations, and the corporate estate, manifests itself together to push narratives, to push agendas. And it also involves the intelligence communities. So I don't know if people remember this, but here's a brief little history lesson if you don't. There was something called Operation Mockingbird. And you may have heard this around. You may have heard this once or twice. This was the known project that the CIA purposely infiltrated the news media. So the intelligence community tried to use the information highway of, mass media, radio stations, television, news anchors, print journalism, so on and so forth, to manufacture these stories and write up fake articles to try to sway public opinion. And they've done this for years. This was back in, I think it was the mid-60s that this was conducted, the Operation Mockingbird. And their reason for it was try to counteract communist propaganda. That's what they claimed is the CIA's goal here. And I brought this up to attention here. And it says, I'll read you the subheadline. It says, Operation Mockingbird was an alleged CIA project that recruited journalists to write fake stories promoting government ideas while dispelling communist ones. So, again, the reason that they do this is try to manufacture consent on imperialism, the American way, the corruption, the chaos, the war propaganda. This is how they sway public opinion. And they've been doing this ever since. And you don't really hear about it much. They try to silence it out. And again, this is the reason why they're trying to do this fight against disinformation. It's not because there's a bunch of lies out there. It's okay to lie to people because they lie out in the open. They've lied for entire years. They've lied to us through the entire nation, through the national means of press. They've been doing it all this time. So it's not the lying that's the problem. It's who is doing the lying. They want to make sure that their lies are spread towards the general public. And for someone like me to, reveal the truth or bring question to those lies, I'm considered the bad person. I'm considered the bad faith. I'm considered the, worst person imaginable. And that's why they have to demonize people. That's why they have to say, oh, you're a Russian propagandist, or you're spreading Assad lies, you're spreading this, you're doing this, you're not patriotic enough, you're a crazed individual, you're a right winger, you're a Trumper, whatever, anti-vaxxer, racist, misogynist, every single trope you can imagine they throw at you because you bother to question the lies. You bother to question and sit down and critically think exactly what this story is trying to tell you. So why am I bringing this to all attention? All seriousness, why am I telling you all this stuff and giving you this brief history lesson? Well, it involves this person by the name of Frank Sneap. Or is it Sneap? Is it Sneap or Snep? You decide, I guess. And that's this guy here with a beautiful headshot, by the way. Does he get is that from like an Academy Actors Guild that they did this headshot? That looks really wonderful. I'm serious. It looks like something out of GQ or something. I'm kind of jealous. So this guy, he's a Peabody Award-winning investigative journalist and broadcaster, best-selling author, former interrogator, counterintelligence operative, and chief strategy analyst for the CIA in Vietnam. He's also a whistleblower. So that's why this is important. So he was a member of the CIA. He blew the whistle on something very, very remarkable, something that needs to be exposed out in the open. And that's why he went from, doing counterintelligence to investigative reporting, and has won multiple awards. Won multiple awards because he was exposing the darkness within the establishment, the darkness within the intelligence communities, the darkness within the elite class, the big giant club, as George Carlin would say. It's a big club and you and I ain't in it. Named defendant in a landmark U.S. Supreme Court ruling on free speech and national security. Expert commander on the Vietnam War, national security, and the First Amendment. So, again, why are we even mentioning any of this? Why even bring this guy up? Well, there's something interesting that I have to share with you, and ironically, it was shared by Edward Snowden on his Twitter account. But this is very, very interesting. So that same guy, Frank Knepp, here in 1993, as you're about to see here, is about to explain exactly in detail Operation Mockingbird. Exactly how the intelligence community and the entire establishment is lying to you in the media. Exactly the play-by-play setup that they're using to manipulate and sway public opinion. And this is as true as it was then as it is now. Because we are seeing it constantly. You go on MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, Washington Post, New York Times, ABC, CBS, Fox, all the networks, all the mainstream outlets, all the corporate media that's brought to you by Pfizer, that's brought to you by Big Pharma, brought to you by big tycoons of the tech industry, brought to you by bigwigs of the oil industry. It is all manufacturing consent to sway public opinion and push their agendas. It's not there to inform you. It's not there to actually investigate on things. It's there to manufacture consent for American imperialism and capitalist ideals. The whole point of it is to sway public opinion for American imperialism, exceptionalism, and to advance warfare. And he's about to explain in 1993, in this clip here of a news report in 1993, exactly how that goes. Take a listen.
Briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. And I would say our percentage planning that kind of data was 70 to 80%. The correspondents we targeted.
So that's interesting that he's pointing out that this is a tactic they used in Vietnam. And back in that day, there was no internet. There was no accessibility of fact-checking because luckily in this day and age, even though we get completely censored out, even though that they've tried a global-wide campaign of trying to silence out dissent, silence out, investigative journalists, silence out people that did not go with the globalist agenda, we're fortunate enough that we're able to connect with individuals from all around the world and see firsthand real information, get full access to a story. That's why, anytime there's a war story that's going on, anytime there's something happening in Syria or Libya or the Middle Eastern countries or Latin America, I don't just take word from MSNBC. I don't just click on the 6 o'clock news, listen to whatever the talking head is saying there, and take it as will. If I want to know something specifically of that country, I'm fortunate enough that I can actually go and look and see, okay, there's a journalist over there that's currently there and is currently investigating the war crimes, currently investigating what's happening over there. Maybe I go check that out. Maybe I go see firsthand what they're witnessing and get an objective source. And unfortunately, that wasn't like that back in the day. And, people took in propaganda, and there was a lot of people that fought against, the Vietnam War. That's where Woodstock came in. That's where a lot of peace activists were railing against the machine and, started that movement. But it's just amazing. It's just amazing that the tactics that they're using, and they even said, like, it's not that we're lying to you. There might be a partial truth, but we're still gonna lie and manipulate you to advance our agenda, advance the CIA's agenda that Vietnam is up to nefarious shit, and we still got to go over there. We have to advance our agenda, and that's the thing here, and that's what baffles me, is that all these people on board of trying to, tackle down disinformation don't even realize that the people that are disinforming them the most are the people that are saying we need to go against disinformation. And they're the ones spreading the most disinformation. They're the ones not telling you the truth. And if they did tell you the truth, it's on page 158, upside down, backwards, sideways. Maybe if you do a Sudoku puzzle, maybe it'll be revealed. And it takes people like me, a dumbass like me in his basement, to try to figure out and connect the dots. Anyway, there's more to this. Let's take a look.
Were those who had terrific influence, the most respected journalists in Saigon, like Robert Chaplin of the New Yorker magazine, Kai's Beach of the Los Angeles Times from time to time, and also he worked for the Chicago Daily News. Bud Merrick of U.S. News and World Report, Malcolm Brown of the New York Times, even Maynard Parker of Newsweek magazine. We would go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that...
I love how, this is back in the day, and there's, it sounds like they have a little bit of a borderline. Like, okay, we're going to tell you some good information, but then we're also going to plant, just relatively terrible information, propaganda, if you will. But we're not going to cross a line. We're going to make sure that there's, valid information within the propaganda. I love how, that was back in the day. If you look at today, if you look at the publications today, that line is basically gone. There is no line between valid information and just straight up propaganda. In fact, I would say 99% of publications have gone full propagandized. 99% of it. That's why it takes critical thinking. That's why people should understand that censorship is not going to help you in the fight for disinformation. You know what's going to help you? Self-determination. Reading articles, reading different opinions, and making critical thoughts for yourself. That's why anytime I mention about COVID, anytime I mention about Russia, I'm gathering all the information available so that I get a clear context and I can make a decision based on that context. That is how you grow and develop as a person. That is why censorship is truly manipulatively evil to any society, to any individual. And anyone that's pursuing it, anyone that's trying to advance it, anyone that's cheering on because there's hate speech out there or people that they don't like, it is going to come to bite you in the ass sooner than you think. And it's just making you dumb and making you foolish, and it's showing your ignorance out in the open. Because you're falling, it's exactly the main trap that these people of the CIA wanted to manipulate back in the day, and they're still trying to do. It's showing your utter arrogance that you're not willing to sit down and think for yourself. But anyway, there's more to this.
We were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate. If I planted a piece of information with a reporter, I would ordinarily then try to create an environment in which he could not check the information. I would go to the British ambassador and brief him on the disinformation I had just given the reporter. So when the reporter wanted to...
So it sounds like exactly what they did with the COVID narrative. If there was any chance of trying to fact check what they were saying about the mandates or the lockdowns or vaccines or anything like that, if you went and go check with the doctors that actually helped create the technology to bring us the vaccines, they were silenced out. You couldn't access their information. They were trying to hide medical reports. They were trying to hide journals. They were trying to hide scientific analysis. You can't even go and look at valid information about the vaccines or about COVID or about the virus. You couldn't do any of that back in the day, just a short while ago. Or even in today's terms when it comes to Russia, Ukraine. If you wanted to hear exactly what's happening in said country, if you wanted to know exactly what was happening in the war zone, they would silence it out. Any objective reporter that was in the Donbass region, we showed you the article about the German reporter that had her entire livelihood destroyed, is currently serving prison time for being objective to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for being an objective reporter in the Donbass region and reporting on the scene. She was completely vilified by the German government. So this is true. This is truer now, and I would say more so now than it is back then, because at least back then they're saying like, oh, we had some sort of consideration line. We at least drew a line in the sand that says, oh, we couldn't go a little too far. Nowadays, it's a free-for-all. It's now the intelligence community just dominating and propagandizing, manipulating, has gone to a global-wide stride to the point where people are screaming and yelling at each other and their friends and families and neighbors for the most unbelievable conceptions. It's downright insane. It's downright insane. And he's saying this in 1993, and it couldn't be truer today.
Cross-check what I told him with, say, the British ambassador, New Zealand ambassador, or what have you. He would get false confirmation, the same message coming back at him, and he'd say, aha, I've got proof that Frank Snepp told me the truth, when in fact, what he'd gotten was simply an echo of what I'd given him in the first place, via the British ambassador or other of our friendly diplomatic contacts. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job.
But sadly, it is today. Sadly. And they even admit to it. They even admit to this day that the intelligence community the CIA, even the FBI. The FBI that appeared on Fox News and openly stated that the purpose of the FBI, not national security, not anything to do with protection or fighting crime or anything like that. Their number one objective at the FBI is to make sure that lefty, progressive ideals do not get into the spectrum. Mean that anything like, healthcare, education, any sort of rational thought does not become part of the American culture. They want to protect the imperialism. They want to protect the corruption. They want to protect the oligarchy. That's what the intelligence community is there for. It's not there for you. It's not there for your neighbors. It's not there for any sort of individual safety and security. It's there to protect the oligarchy. It's there to protect the status quo that's been oppressing you ever since. And that's why the last person who objectified to the CIA unfortunately got assassinated. The last person was JFK. JFK was the one that wanted to break up the CIA, wanted to dismantle the intelligence community and break it up to a smaller fraction because they were going to get overpowered and overwhelmed. And it's truer now than it is today. It's a hell of a lot. It's so monopolized. Same with, Dwight D. Eisenhower saying about the war machine, the military-industrial complex. He gave us a bleak warning that if we don't break this up, if we don't hold them accountable, they were going to become unbelievably unhinged and uncontrollable, which is now what we're facing. We're now facing that because we didn't listen to the warnings back then. And they try to cover up and hide their crimes, hide their unbelievably inhumane, unspeakable things deemed imaginable. So that is amazing that is being published. It's amazing that, Edward Snowden, who's also a great American hero, was able to track this down. I think this is very valid, and people should be watching this. And thank God it hasn't been strike down by, big tech censorship. At least not yet. And here's also this. So, you think that people, should be smart enough to realize that, if they've been lied to all these years, that maybe, don't take things for granted. Don't, fall down to that trap. Don't just read the headline and accept it. Think for yourselves. Well, here's the thing. Because of the pandemic, because of Russia, because of Trump, because of MAGA, because of 2016, because of 2020, because of all this, we get articles like this. And this just goes to show you how they want to manipulate you and make you feel so stupid. They are literally insulting you to your face when you see articles like this. This is from the New York Times. The New York Times that published, don't go down the rabbit hole. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do so. I was taught to do so. That's why I'm doing it right now. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do so, isn't helping the fight against misinformation. That is the most stupidest, absurd argument I've ever heard in my life. So, in order to battle out misinformation and figuring out the lies and the truth and the differences between fact and fiction, you can't think for yourself. You're not supposed to think about it. Because apparently thinking about it and to try and determine what is fact and fiction isn't going to help you what's fact and fiction. That is unbelievably absurd. Unbelievably absurd. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand how stupid that is. That basically what you're doing is saying fall into the propaganda. You want people to get into misinformation. You want people to be misinformed. You don't want people to be knowledgeable. You don't want people to think. You dumb idiots. And that's from the New York Times. No wonder they would say something like that. The New York Times has been propagandizing people since the 50s. They're the biggest perpetrators of misinformation because their attachment to the CIA, because their attachment to the intelligence communities, because their attachment to the war crimes. They're the ones that are perpetrating the most misinformation. And now they're telling you don't think about the misinformation. Don't try to actually factualize and think and self-determine and read and study things and know things. How dare you do something like that? And they even bring up an excerpt of the article here. It says, for an academic, Michael Caulfield has an odd request. Stop overthinking what you see online. I can't believe this day and age, in 2022, in the dawn of the information superhighway, we have all this connectivity, we have the internet, we have all this information at our fingertips. But apparently, from an academic, I can't think about it. Stop overthinking things. Stop investigating things. Stop looking at things and referring it and making a critical analysis of what you read. Oh my God, stop having comprehension. Like, I learned about this in school, for God's sakes. I learned about this since I was a kid. That was important to critical thinking skills. It was important to have comprehension. It was important to study. It was important to read things for yourself. Have self-determination. That is how you grow as a person. And now you're getting an academic that have no idea where he came from. A random academic saying that, oh, stop overthinking things. Isn't that how you become an academic? You're supposed to think. You're supposed to research and have analysis. The New York Times telling you not to read. Wow. What a dumb thing that, like, the most absurd argument. Mr. Caulfield, a digital literacy expert. That is such a big lie. There's misinformation right there. A digital literacy expert telling you not to overthink. That's kind of the point of literacy. That's kind of the whole point. If you're not telling people to think what they're seeing online, then you should not be calling yourself a digital literacy expert. Period. That is not your job title then. You should lose your credibility because of that. Because I took media literacy. I took many courses on media literacy. I love those courses. It's one of the reasons that I'm doing this show right now. It's one of the things that inspired me to do this show. And I wish more people had access to media literacy and understand how absurd and stupid this is. So he's an expert at Washington State University, Vancouver, knows all too well at this very moment more people are fighting for the opportunity to lie to you than at perhaps any other point in human history. So if he's telling you that more and more people are lying to you, wouldn't the smart thing to do is to figure out who exactly is lying to you? Oh, that's overthinking things. How dare you overthink? This is the dumbest argument. Literally the dumbest, stupidest goddamn argument. I don't know who this guy is, but he's not an expert. He's not a literacy expert. He's nothing. If he's making the stupid ass point of saying that people are lying to you, but you can't figure out who's lying to you. Because that'd be overthinking. And how dare you do your own research? How dare you think for yourself? How dare you have critical analysis to figure out who's lying to you and who isn't? What a dumb idiot. What a dumb fucking idiot this guy, Michael Caulfield, and the guy that wrote this art. Like, how stupid this. Of course it came from the New York Times. Of course it came from the New York Times. So I also want to read this part, and I wish I had the actual article, but I had to maneuver this because apparently the New York Times doesn't even want readers. Or at least they don't, you can't read an article without going through a paywall, so I'm just, cheaping out. But I want to read this part here, because this is another excerpt of the article. And it says, misinformation rides the greased algorithmic rails of powerful social media platforms and travels at velocities and in volumes that make it nearly impossible to stop. Did he used to write sci-fi novels? Is that what makes him an expert? Jesus. That alone makes information warfare. Information warfare. So now it's the battle of minds. It's the battle of trying to control your mind. Who exactly is going to manipulate you the most? Because apparently people are so goddamn stupid they can't think for themselves. But if they want to think for themselves, then that makes them even more stupid, according to this jackass. That alone makes information warfare an unfair fight for the average internet user. But Mr. Caulfield argues that the deck is stacked even further against us. Oh, you poor thing. You mean people are examining your bullshit? You mean people are not getting fooled by a liar like yourself? Oh, you poor thing. How dare people think? How dare people analyze this and realize how stupid you're sounding right now? How dare they? That the way we're taught from a young age to evaluate and think critically about information is fundamentally flawed. It's fundamentally flawed because people are realizing what a jackass I am. Yeah, you know why it's fundamentally flawed? Because they don't want people to think about it. They don't want critical thinkers. They don't want people to investigate. They don't want people to do research. That is why it is so flawed. That is why. Because there's no education on how to evaluate all the information and to think critically about the things that you're seeing and the things that you're reading. How many schools in America teach media literacy? Like, I was fortunate enough that here in Canada, I was fortunate enough to have courses like that. I've never heard of a school in America offering stuff like that. How many schools in America have a course on this? Or civics or anything like that? Any useful information to understand your point in life and what you mean to this country. Is there any sort of course like that? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, they barely teach, personal finance. They barely teach, life skills. It is literally, it's flawed purposely, ladies and gentlemen. It is flawed purposely because they want you to be smart enough to figure out the clogs and machinery to make, the rich even richer, but not smart enough to figure out why you're doing it. It's done purposely because they don't want people to step out of line. They don't want people to investigate. They don't want people to question and challenge the authority that's oppressing them for all these years. That is what is happening. And that is why the New York Times is doing such bullshit articles that are probably written up by the CIA. And as you just saw in that video there, the proof is in the pudding that the CIA purposely does it to manipulate and sway general public opinion on imperialism, on the war crimes. And that's why we live in the messed up world that we are in today. And now they're trying to hide as much information as possible so that people aren't able to think for themselves, not able to have a counter reaction, not be able to see all the information available so that they can determine for themselves and figure out exactly who is lying and who isn't. Which is something that I was taught at a young age. I'm sure you were taught at a young age. I'm sure at some point your grandparents, were taught this. That now all of a sudden is so dangerous and so deadly that, thinking is the new virus, apparently. There's so much things on the internet, but you can't analyze it and think for yourself. It is just downright insane. It's downright insane and barbaric. And this is how they control and operate on society. Because a healthy, functioning society would be able to access this information and think critically for themselves. Think of ancient civilizations that had philosophers. Do you think they sat down and go, oh, we should, self-censor and we need to censor out all this information? No, they sat down and thought, why are people censoring? Why are people doing this? Why does humanity act in this way? The most brilliant minds of the world didn't comply to this. The most brilliant minds of the world thought how stupid this is and critically analyzed how stupid this is. That's the difference, and that's societal growth, which is something they don't want. They don't want, period. They want the plebes to remain plebes and not be knowledgeable, because knowledge is power, and if we're knowledgeable about the shit that they're doing behind closed doors, God knows what will happen next. People will wake up to it. People might protest about it. People might be absurd about what our country is actually doing to its people and to people around the world. That's why they want to keep us in the dark.